Arizona Territory, 1877. The scorching desert air carried only the scent of sage and dust until blood tainted the wind. Sarah Holloway stood frozen at the edge of the ravine, watching as massive claws tore into the warrior's flesh. Without weapons or training, she did the unthinkable, charged straight at the 1,000-pound grizzly, her shawl whipping like battle flags as ancient screams tore from her throat. The startled bear hesitated just long enough. Later, the Apache. Braves who witnessed it said the Great Spirit himself must have guided her actions. They carried their fallen war chief, Blood of the Mountain, to her cabin, his life hanging by threads thinner than spider silk. Could the hands of a white settler, woman, truly save the most feared Apache warrior in the territory? Or would ancient hatreds prove stronger than this unlikely bond? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over Sarah Holloway's homestead, painting the weathered logs of her cabin in gold. At 43, she had carved out a life here that few women dared attempt, especially alone. The small ranch nestled in a valley where cottonwoods and willows followed a year-round creek, a green sanctuary amid the harsh Arizona desert. Sarah sat at her rough-hewn table, a leather-bound journal open before her. Delicate sketches of plants filled the pages, each annotated in her careful script: preparations, dosages, uses. Her grandmother's knowledge from the old country blended with wisdom gained from Mexican curanderas and friendly Pima women who had shared their secrets with her. "Mama, the chickens are acting strange again," Thomas called from the doorway, his 10-year-old frame silhouetted against the morning light. Her son, all gangly limbs and curious eyes, was the spitting image of his father. Probably another coyote sniffing around, she replied, closing her journal. "Get the rifle, but just fire into the air if you see anything." Thomas nodded with solemn responsibility. Sarah watched him go, marveling at how much he'd grown in the 3 years since. Influenza had taken her husband. The boy had stepped up, trying to be the man of the house far too early. Sarah rose, tucking the journal into the pocket of her apron. She needed to gather more yarrow and juniper berries today. Dr. Foster from Copper Springs would be making his monthly visit to trade medical supplies for her tinctures next week, and her stores were running low. The nearest settlement was a full day's ride away, which suited Sarah fine. Out here, no one questioned a woman who knew more about medicine than most doctors. No one except Dr. Foster himself, who had initially scoffed at her folk remedies until he saw how settlers sought her out when his own treatments failed. "Mrs. Holloway cured my Mary's fever when the doctor gave up hope," they'd say. Or, "That salve she makes healed my burn when nothing else would." Sarah strapped on her gathering satchel and checked the small pistol she always carried. The Apaches had been quiet lately, but the uneasy peace in this territory could shatter like thin ice at any moment. Captain Harrington and his cavalry unit had been pushing deeper into Apache lands, despite the treaty boundaries. "I'm heading up to the North Ridge," she called to Thomas. "I'll be back by midday." "The Apache have been seen up there," Thomas said, his voice wavering slightly. Sarah nodded. "I know, but the best yarrow grows on that ridge. I'll be careful." She didn't tell him that she sometimes encountered Apache women gathering the same plants. They would nod to each other, maintaining a respectful distance, women's work transcending the conflicts of men. As she hiked the winding trail up the ridge, Sarah's thoughts drifted to the rumors spreading through the territory. Blood of the Mountain, the fiercest of the Apache war chiefs, had been leading increasingly bold raids against settlements and military outposts. The name alone made settler women clutch their children closer and men check their rifles. Sarah had never seen him, but stories painted him as something more than human. A warrior who could move like smoke through the night, who had killed dozens of soldiers with his own hands, who wore a necklace of cavalry buttons taken from his victims. The frontier newspapers called him a savage devil. The cavalry had placed a bounty on his head. Yet Sarah remembered what old Luisa, the Mexican midwife who had taught her about desert plants, had once said, "Men become monsters in the stories of their enemies, but they all bleed the same. They all love their children the same." The morning sun climbed higher as Sarah reached the ridge. She knelt beside a cluster of yarrow, its feathery leaves and white flower clusters nodding in the breeze. As she began to harvest, the distant scream of a mountain lion echoed across the canyon, or was it something else entirely? Blood of the Mountain stood alone on the sacred heights, the rising sun warming his face. At 45 winters, his body bore the scars of countless battles against rival tribes, Mexican soldiers, and now the blue-coated cavalry that pushed ever deeper into Apache lands. His people called him Tizzojash in their own tongue, but enemies had given him the name that now spread fear throughout the territory. The war chief raised the bone whistle that hung from a leather cord around his neck, carved from the leg. Bone of the first elk he had killed as a youth. Its sound could carry for miles across the canyons, bringing his warriors to his side. But today he did not blow it. Today was for listening, not calling. 4 days of fasting had sharpened his senses. The vision quest was necessary. His people needed guidance. The reservation or continued resistance. Surrender or war until the last Apache fell. The responsibility weighed on him like the great stones that crushed enemies in the old stories. "You have been here too long," came a voice behind him. Stoneface, his most trusted warrior, approached with silent steps despite his massive frame. The older man's visage, permanently frozen in what appeared to be a stern expression from a childhood bout with the white man's palsy sickness, gave him his name. "The spirits have not yet spoken," Blood of the Mountain replied. "Perhaps they speak, but you do not hear, because your belly is empty and your mind weak from thirst," Stoneface said bluntly. No other would dare speak to the chief this way, but they had fought side by side since boyhood. Blood of the Mountain almost smiled. Such wisdom from a man who consulted a vision of dancing deer before choosing his last wife, Stoneface grunted. "The deer led me true. My woman is strong and gives me no peace, exactly as the vision showed." His expression turned serious. "Young Eagle has returned from scouting. More bluecoats arrive at the fort. Their new leader, the one they call Harrington, boasts he will have your scalp by the next full moon." Many have made such boasts. The coyotes pick their bones clean. This one is different. He studies our ways, uses Apache scouts, and he has maps drawn by a man named Ellsworth from the town of Copper Waters. Blood of the Mountain nodded. Threats were nothing new, but maps showing their hidden water sources, the secret paths through the mountains, the caves where they sheltered the old ones and children during raids. That was a danger like poison in the well. "We should kill this map maker," Stoneface suggested, "and have the bluecoats burn every village in retaliation. No, we must be smarter than the coyote this time." The chief turned back to the view, gazing across the vast landscape that had been Apache land since before memory. "Tell Young Eagle to gather the warriors. We will—" A sound interrupted him, the deep-throated growl of a creature even Apache. Warriors respected. Blood of the Mountain turned slowly. Not 20 paces away, a massive grizzly reared on its hind legs, standing taller than 2 men. The beast must have been drawn by the scent of the small pouch of sacred herbs the chief carried. "Do not move," he whispered to Stoneface, who had already drawn his knife, but the grizzly charged with shocking speed. Blood of the Mountain shouted for Stoneface to run, as he himself dodged sideways, drawing the bear's attention. His own knife seemed pitifully small against the creature's bulk. The chief had faced death many times, but never like this. Not during a sacred quest, not when his people needed guidance. Was this the spirit's answer then? Death by the mountain's fiercest guardian? The bear's paw struck him, ripping through buckskin and flesh. Pain exploded across his chest as he fell, backward, tumbling down the rocky slope. His vision blurred, the world spinning around him. He heard Stoneface's shout, felt the earth trembling with the bear's pursuit. As darkness edged his vision, Blood of the Mountain glimpsed something unexpected through the trees below. A flash of color, a woman's shape, a white woman, alone, on Apache hunting grounds, gathering plants like one of their own women. Then the Grizzly was upon him again, and everything went black. Captain James Harrington sat at his desk in Fort Buchanan, reviewing the latest dispatches. At 38, his rapid rise through military ranks had been fueled by ambition and an uncanny ability to achieve objectives others deemed impossible. His clean-shaven face and immaculate uniform contrasted sharply with the rugged frontier surroundings. "Another report of Apache movements near Copper Springs, sir," Lieutenant Collins announced, placing a folded paper on the captain's desk. Harrington broke the seal and scanned the contents. Blood of the Mountain was spotted in the high country, apparently on some kind of spiritual journey. He said the words with unconcealed disdain. "The savage's head would make a fine trophy to send back east. It might even earn me that promotion to major. He's never alone, sir. His warriors guard him like a pack of wolves. Every man has his weakness, Collins, even Apache war chiefs." Harrington opened a drawer and removed a letter marked "Confidential." "New orders from the Department of War. We're to clear all Apache from this territory by year's end. Those who surrender go to the reservation at San Carlos. Those who resist—" He let the implication hang in the air. "The reservation is hardly better than a prison camp, sir." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning orders, Lieutenant?" "No, sir, just stating facts. Facts are irrelevant. Results are what matter. Speaking of which, is Mayor Ellsworth coming today?" "Yes, sir, and he's bringing those maps he promised." Harrington nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Dismissed." After the lieutenant left, Harrington unfolded a large territorial map across his desk. He had marked known Apache encampments in red, suspected locations in blue, but the most valuable intelligence came from Mayor Ellsworth. Locations of water sources, hidden canyons, and ancient pathways used by the Apache for generations. Information that would allow him to finally corner the elusive Blood of the Mountain. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Mayor Theodore Ellsworth swept in, a portly man dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place on the frontier. Behind him followed Dr. William Foster, the town physician. "Captain Harrington! Glorious day, isn't it?" The mayor boomed. "Indeed. Do you have what I requested?" "Better." Ellsworth extracted a rolled parchment from his leather satchel. "This shows the location of the Apache's most sacred ceremonial grounds. My source says Blood of the Mountain performs rituals there before major raids, your source being a half-breed scout who grew up among them. Reliable, I assure you." Harrington studied the new map. "This is excellent, Mayor. With this information, we can plan a decisive strike." "I'm pleased to be of service," Ellsworth said, beaming. "Once the Apache threat is eliminated, our little Copper Springs can flourish. I've already received inquiries from mining companies interested in the region." Dr. Foster, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "And what becomes of the Apache people?" Ellsworth waved a dismissive hand. "Progress marches forward, Doctor. Surely you're not one of those bleeding hearts who think savages can be civilized." "I merely question whether extermination is our only option," Foster replied evenly. "Some, like that healer woman outside town, Sarah Holloway, have managed peaceful interactions with various tribes. Mrs. Holloway is a peculiar case." Ellsworth sniffed. "A widow living alone with her boy, mixing potions and consorting with Mexicans and Indians. Hardly a model for territorial policy. Yet her remedies work where my medical training sometimes fails," Foster admitted. "And she's never been harmed, despite living closer to Apache territory than anyone." "Enough about the herb woman," Harrington interrupted. "Mayor, when can you organize the civilian militia we discussed? I want coordinated operations, cavalry from the fort, militia from town." "Consider it done, Captain. The town council meets tomorrow. I'll have volunteers within the week." As the men continued planning, a clerk appeared with an urgent message. Beg. Pardon, sir, Scout reports an Apache brave riding hard toward the mountains. Appeared to be in great haste, possibly carrying news. Harrington's eyes gleamed. Something's happening, something important. He turned to Ellsworth. It may be time to accelerate our plans, Mayor. What none of them realized was that at that very moment, the course of their carefully laid plans was being forever altered by a chance encounter on a remote mountainside. Sarah's basket was half filled with yarrow when she heard it, a sound that froze her blood, the unmistakable roar of a grizzly, followed by a man's shout of pain. Both sounds came from just beyond the ridge. Most frontier women would have fled. Sarah hesitated only a moment before dropping her basket and scrambling toward the commotion. She'd seen what grizzlies could do to a full-grown man. No one deserved such a death. Cresting the ridge, she took in the scene with one horrified glance. A massive bear, larger than any she'd ever seen, was mauling a man who lay crumpled against the rocks. Blood darkened the ground around him. 20 yards away, another man was desperately trying to distract the bear, shouting and throwing stones. It took Sarah precious seconds to process what she was seeing. The men were Apache warriors, and based on the elaborate adornments of the fallen man's clothing, she was witnessing the death of someone important. The standing warrior caught sight of her, his face registering shock at seeing a white woman. Their eyes locked across the distance. And in that moment, Sarah made a decision that defied all frontier logic. She unwound the red woolen shawl from her shoulders and began waving it wildly over her head. Then, drawing on half-remembered stories her grandmother had told of the old country, she let loose a blood-curdling scream, the kind mountain women in Europe had once used to frighten wolves from their flocks. Aye! The sound tore from her throat, primal and shocking even to her own ears. The grizzly paused, massive head swinging toward this new threat. Sarah continued screaming, advancing with her shawl flapping like a banner of war. She had no plan beyond drawing the bear away from the wounded man. The rational part of her mind, the part screaming that she was committing suicide, seemed distant and unimportant. The bear rose to its full height, 12 feet of muscle and fury. For one eternal moment, it assessed her, black eyes glittering, with animal intelligence. Then, remarkably, it dropped to all fours, huffed a massive breath, and lumbered away into the brush. Perhaps it decided this strange, shrieking creature wasn't worth the trouble when it already had prey at hand. Or perhaps, as the Apache would later tell it, the spirits intervened. Sarah didn't question her miracle. She rushed to the fallen warrior, dropping to her knees beside him. Blood pulsed from deep lacerations across his chest and shoulder. One look told her these were mortal wounds. Without immediate attention, the other warrior approached cautiously, knife still drawn. Up close, Sarah could see the permanent grimace that marked his face, a palsy condition she recognized from her medical experience. "I can help him," she said, knowing he probably didn't understand English. She pointed to the wounded chief, then to her small medicine pouch. "Help. Medicine." The warrior's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but the chief groaned, momentarily regaining consciousness. To Sarah's surprise, he spoke in halting English. "The bear? Gone," Sarah replied, already tearing strips from her petticoat to use as bandages. "But you're badly hurt. I need to stop this bleeding." The chief's eyes, clouded with pain, studied her face. "Why? Would you help?" Before Sarah could answer, more warriors appeared, rushing down the slope with weapons ready. The stone-faced warrior barked orders in Apache, pointing at Sarah, then at the wounded chief. A heated discussion followed, incomprehensible to her but clearly about her fate. The chief's voice cut through their argument, weak but commanding. He spoke a few labored words before losing consciousness again. Stone face turned to Sarah. He says, "Take him to your place for healing." His English was heavily accented but clear enough. "We follow. You try tricks, you die." Sarah nodded, mind racing. Taking the feared Apache war chief to her home? What madness was this? Yet the healer in her couldn't refuse. My cabin is an hour's ride down the valley. He needs a travois to keep him stable. As the warriors fashioned a rough stretcher from branches and leather, Sarah pressed her blood-soaked shawl against the chief's wounds. Strange how fate worked. She'd come to gather healing herbs, and instead found herself responsible for the life of the most dangerous man in the territory, and perhaps her own death if she failed. Thomas Holloway was cleaning his father's old rifle on the porch when he spotted them coming down the trail, a procession unlike anything he'd ever seen. Apache warriors, at least 8 of them, carrying what appeared to be a body on a makeshift stretcher. Leading them was his mother. The boy nearly dropped the rifle in shock. Instead, he raised it with trembling hands. "Mama!" he called, voice cracking with fear. "It's all right, Thomas," Sarah called back, though nothing about the situation was remotely all right. "Put the gun down. We have someone who needs help." Thomas lowered the rifle but kept it close as the procession reached the cabin. The warriors' faces were impassive, but their eyes took in everything: the layout of the homestead, the outbuildings, the garden, and especially the boy. "Inside," Sarah directed, pointing to the door. "Thomas, clear off the table." The boy hesitated, only a moment before running inside to obey. By the time the warriors had maneuvered their burden through the doorway, the large oak table where the Holloways took their meals was swept clean. In the cabin's dim light, Sarah got her first good look at the wounded man. The bear's claws had opened 3 deep furrows across his chest and shoulder. Another slash had laid open his left thigh. Blood loss alone would kill him soon without intervention. "I need hot water, clean cloths, my medicine bag, and honey," she instructed Thomas, who stood wide-eyed in the corner. "Now, Thomas!" The boy scurried to obey, while Sarah cut away the chief's bloodied buckskin shirt with her scissors. The warriors watched her every move, hands never far from their weapons. Stoneface stepped forward, removing a small leather pouch from around the chief's neck. "His medicine bundle," he explained, "very sacred. Must stay with him." Sarah nodded. "I understand. Put it beside him where it won't get wet." As Thomas brought the requested supplies, Sarah worked with the efficiency of long practice. First, cleaning the wounds with water, in which she'd steeped yarrow to help stop the bleeding, then applying honey to prevent putrefaction, finally, carefully stitching the deepest gashes with catgut thread. Throughout her ministrations, the chief remained unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. The warriors watched in silence as Sarah worked well into the evening, her hands sure despite the gravity of the situation. Finally, she straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "I've done what I can," she told Stoneface. "Now we wait. The next 2 days will tell if he lives or dies." Stoneface translated for the others. A serious discussion followed. "2 will stay inside with Chief," Stoneface announced. "Others guard outside." Sarah nodded. There was no point arguing. "Thomas and I will sleep in the back room. The wounded man should not be moved from the table tonight." She turned to her son. "Bring blankets for our guests." Later, with 2 warriors stationed inside and the rest surrounding the cabin, Sarah and Thomas whispered in the cramped back bedroom. "Mama, that's him, isn't it? The Apache chief everyone's afraid of. Blood of the mountain." Sarah brushed the hair from her son's forehead. "Yes. Why'd you bring him here? The soldiers will hang us as traitors." "Because he would have died otherwise, Thomas, and I'm a healer. I couldn't let that happen, not when I could help." "Even for an Apache who's killed settlers?" Sarah sighed. "When a person is bleeding under your hands, they're not an enemy or a friend. They're just someone who needs help." Thomas was silent for a long moment. "Pa would have understood, I reckon." "Yes," Sarah smiled sadly. "He would have." In the main room, Blood of the Mountain stirred fitfully on the table. Fever had set in, and he murmured in his native tongue. Stoneface placed a hand on his chief's forehead, then glanced toward the bedroom where the white woman and her son whispered. He had seen many strange things in his 48 winters, but never had he witnessed anything like today. A white woman charging a grizzly with nothing but a red shawl and her voice as weapons. Now this same woman worked to save the life of a man whose name made her kind tremble in fear. Perhaps the spirits were at work here, weaving a path none of them could yet see. Dawn brought no relief from the tension that filled the Holloway cabin. Sarah had slept fitfully, rising every hour to check on her patient. The Apache chief's fever had climbed through the night, his skin burning to the touch despite the cool cloths she applied. "Will he die?" Thomas asked, helping her prepare a willow bark tea for the fever. "Not if I can help it," Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. Bear claws carried filth that often led to putrefaction. She'd seen strong men succumb to such infections despite her best efforts. Stoneface hadn't moved from his vigil beside his chief. The permanent grimace on his face made his expressions hard to read, but Sarah recognized the concern in his eyes. "He needs to drink this," she told him, holding up the steaming mug. "It will help fight the fever." Stoneface nodded, then helped. Her lift blood of the mountain's head. Sarah carefully tipped some of the bitter liquid between the warrior's cracked lips. Most dribbled down his chin, but he swallowed reflexively. "Thomas, fetch fresh water from the creek," Sarah instructed. "And gather more yarrow if you can find it near the house." Alone, with them outside, Thomas glanced nervously toward the door. "They won't harm you. You're under their protection now, same as me." After Thomas had gone, Stoneface spoke. "The boy fears us. Can you blame him? He's grown up hearing stories about Apache raiders." "Not stories, truth." Stoneface's face hardened. "We fight for our land. Your people take, kill, push us away." Sarah couldn't argue. "Not all of us want that. But you do nothing to stop it." The accusation hung in the air between them. Sarah turned back to her patient, changing the blood-soaked bandages. The wounds looked angry and inflamed, but she was relieved to see no black edges that would indicate spreading putrefaction. A commotion outside drew their attention. One of the Apache guards entered, speaking rapidly to Stoneface. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Riders coming, blue coats, 2 of them." Sarah's heart raced. "Cavalry scouts. If they find you here—" Stoneface barked orders. Within moments, the warriors. Inside, the cabin had vanished into the back room. Outside, the others melted into the surrounding brush and trees. "Stay with him," Sarah instructed Stoneface, who remained beside the chief. "Keep him quiet. I'll handle this." She smoothed her hair and apron, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the porch, just as 2 cavalry scouts reined in their horses in the yard. Thomas stood frozen by the water pump, bucket in hand. "Morning, ma'am," the lead rider called. "Everything all right out here? We're patrolling for Apache sign." "Everything's fine, Corporal," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. "Just another quiet day." The soldier's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mind if we water our horses? Been riding since dawn." "Of course not." Thomas helped the soldiers. As Thomas pumped water into the trough, the second soldier dismounted and stretched. "Mighty isolated out here, ma'am, especially with all the Apache activity lately," I manage. "Well enough." The soldier nodded toward the cabin. "Mind if I trouble you for a cup of coffee? Been a long patrol." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "I'm afraid I'm all out. Haven't been to town in weeks." "No coffee? That's mighty strange for a settler household." The man took a step toward the door. "I said I'm out," Sarah repeated, firmly, moving to block his path. "And I'm quite busy today, Corporal, if there's nothing else." The soldier studied her face for a long moment. "You sure everything's all right, ma'am? You seem nervous." "Just have a lot of work to do. Garden won't tend itself." Inside the cabin, blood of the mountain stirred on the table, letting out a low moan. The sound was barely audible, but the corporal's head snapped up. "Someone else in there?" "Just my son's dog. He's been sick." The corporal looked skeptical, but his companion had remounted. "Come on, Jenkins. Captain wants us back before noon." After a final suspicious glance, the corporal returned to his horse. "Be careful, ma'am. Blood of the mountain's been spotted. In these parts, mean as they come, that one. Wouldn't hesitate to scalp a woman and child." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'll keep that in mind." She stood on the porch, heart pounding, until the riders disappeared down the trail. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding and hurry back inside. Stoneface had his hand clamped firmly over the chief's mouth. "Close," he said, removing it as Sarah approached. "Too close," Sarah agreed, "and they'll be back. They suspect something." Captain Harrington raised his brass spyglass, focusing on the distant homestead nestled in the valley. From this ridge, he could make out the Holloway woman hanging wash, while her son tended the garden. Everything appeared ordinary enough. "You're certain of what you heard, Corporal Jenkins?" he asked, collapsing the spyglass with a snap. "Yes, sir, definitely a man's voice, and Mrs. Holloway was mighty anxious to keep us outside." Lieutenant Collins shifted in his saddle. "With respect, sir, Mrs. Holloway might simply value her privacy. Many frontier women do, especially widows." "Perhaps," Harrington conceded. "Or perhaps she's harboring someone she shouldn't be, a deserter, a fugitive." His eyes narrowed. "Or an Apache." "That's a serious accusation, Captain," Collins replied. "Mrs. Holloway has a reputation as a healer. Dr. Foster speaks highly of her." "Foster has a soft spot for anyone who isn't white," Harrington muttered. "Keep the patrol circling this area. I want to know if anyone approaches or leaves that homestead." As the cavalry officers rode back toward Copper Springs, Dr. William Foster was hitching his horse to his buggy for his weekly rounds. The town was already bustling with activity. Miners heading to work, merchants opening their shops, a freight wagon unloading supplies at the general store. Foster spotted Mayor Ellsworth emerging from the newspaper office, a fresh copy of the Copper Springs Sentinel in hand. The headline caught Foster's eye. "Apache terror continues. Bounty for blood of the mountain increased." "Morning, Doctor," Ellsworth called. "Have you seen this? They've raised the bounty to $500. Dead or alive, though I suspect nobody much cares if he's breathing when they collect." Foster took the offered newspaper. $500 would tempt many a desperate man to murder. "It's not murder to kill a savage who's taken so many." "White lives," Ellsworth replied, his jovial tone hardening. "Speaking of savages, the captain tells me Mrs. Holloway might be harboring an Apache fugitive." Foster looked up sharply. "That's absurd. Sarah Holloway is a respectable widow who keeps to herself and helps the sick." "Perhaps, but Jenkins reported strange doings at her place yesterday. Thought you should know, since you're headed that direction. Wouldn't want you walking into trouble." Foster folded the newspaper carefully. "I appreciate your concern, Mayor, but I've known Sarah for years. There's not a duplicitous bone in her body." As Foster drove his buggy out of town, worry gnawed at him. Sarah lived dangerously close to Apache territory. If Harrington suspected her of something, she could face serious trouble, regardless of the truth. Back at the Holloway homestead, Blood of the Mountain had been moved from the table to a pallet near the fireplace. His fever had broken during the night, but he remained weak from blood loss. Sarah changed his bandages, pleased to see the wounds beginning to heal without infection. "You have strong medicine," Stoneface observed from his position by the door. "Just knowledge and clean hands," Sarah replied, "and perhaps a bit of luck." The chief's eyes flickered open, focusing slowly on Sarah's face. "The white woman," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You drove away the bear." "Rest," Sarah instructed. "You're not out of danger yet." But Blood of the Mountain reached for her wrist with surprising strength. "Why? Why would you save an enemy?" Sarah considered the question. "Is that what we are? Enemies? We've never met before yesterday." A ghost of a smile touched the chief's lips. "Your cavalry says I am the devil. And what do your people say about me? That white women are weak, useless except for making babies." His dark eyes held hers. "But you, not weak." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "No, not weak. just different from what you expected, as you are different from what I expected." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. "Mama, Dr. Foster's. Coming up the road." Stoneface was on his feet instantly, knife in hand. The other warriors materialized from their positions around the cabin, awaiting instructions. "Dr. Foster is a friend," Sarah explained quickly. "But if he sees you, he'll be obligated to report it. Hide in the root cellar, quickly." As the warriors helped move their chief toward the trap door in the floor, Sarah placed a hand on Stone. "Face his arm. Please, no violence, the doctor means no harm." Stoneface studied her face. "You trust this man?" "With my life, but not with your secret. Not yet." The trap door closed just as the sound of wagon wheels reached the front yard. Sarah smoothed her apron, took a deep breath, and prepared for another dangerous deception. Dr. William Foster was not easily shocked after 15 years of frontier medicine, but the sight that greeted him as he entered Sarah Holloway's cabin gave him pause. Blood, a substantial amount of it, stained the floorboards near her large oak table, despite obvious attempts to clean it. "Sarah," he called, setting his medical bag on a chair. "Thomas said you were inside." Sarah emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. "William, this is a surprise. Thought you weren't due until next week." Foster glanced again at the bloodstains. "Are you all right? There's blood on your floor." "Oh, that," Sarah waved dismissively. "Thomas brought home a wounded coyote pup yesterday. I tried to save it, but—" She shrugged. "Nature took its course." Foster had known Sarah long enough to recognize when she wasn't telling the whole truth. "Sarah, what's really going on? Jenkins reported something strange here yesterday, and Harrington has his eye on you." Sarah's face paled slightly. "Jenkins is imagining things, and the captain should worry more about real threats than a widow and her son." "The latest Sentinel," Foster said, handing her the newspaper he'd brought. "They've increased the bounty on Blood of the Mountain. $500 now." Sarah scanned the headline, her expression carefully neutral. "A small fortune out here. Enough to turn neighbor against neighbor." Foster lowered his voice. "If you're involved in something dangerous, Sarah, I need to know. I might be able to help." Before Sarah could respond, a floorboard creaked beneath the carpet, so faint most would have missed it. Foster's eyes darted to the floor, then back to Sarah's face. "You have someone hidden here." It wasn't a question. Sarah took a deep breath. "William, you've been my friend since John died. I trust you with my life, but what I'm about to show you, you must swear on your honor as a physician to keep secret." Foster hesitated only briefly. "You know I follow the Hippocratic oath above. All else I swear." Sarah crossed to the center of the room and pulled back the carpet, revealing the trap door to the root cellar. She knocked twice, then stepped back. The door lifted, and Stoneface emerged first, knife in hand, eyes wary. Behind him, 2 warriors supported Blood of the Mountain between them, the chief still weak but alert. Foster stumbled backward. "My God, Sarah, do you know who that is?" "Yes," she said simply. "I found him being mauled by a grizzly. I drove the bear off and have been treating his wounds." "This is Blood of the Mountain himself," Foster whispered, staring at the legendary Apache leader whose name terrorized the territory. "If Harrington finds him here, he'll hang you and Thomas both before asking a single question. Which is why." "No one can know," Sarah replied. "Help me get him back to the pallet by the fire. His fever broke, but the wounds need tending." To her relief, Foster's medical training overrode his fear. He approached cautiously, hands raised to show he carried no weapon. "I'm a healer, like the woman," he explained to Stoneface. "I want to examine him." Stoneface looked to his chief for guidance. Blood of the Mountain nodded once, and the warriors allowed Foster to help move him to the pallet. As Foster examined the savage wounds on the chief's chest and shoulder, his professional demeanor returned. "These sutures are excellent work, Sarah, very clean. But this one here is showing signs of infection." He pointed to the wound on the chief's thigh. For the next hour, Foster worked alongside Sarah, cleaning and redressing the wounds, administering laudanum for pain, and preparing a poultice of his own design. "The Cavalry is watching this homestead," Foster said quietly as they worked. "Harrington suspects something. You won't be able to keep this secret for long." "I only need a few more days," Sarah replied, "until he's strong enough to return to his people." Foster glanced at the Apache warriors standing silently around the room. "And then what? You think they'll just leave you be? Sarah, you know what they do to settlements, to women and children." Blood of the Mountain, who had been listening with half-closed eyes, spoke in his deep, accented voice. "The woman saved my life. By Apache law, her life is now sacred to my people." Foster's eyebrows rose. "Is that true?" "It is our way," Stoneface confirmed. "She has earned the protection of the people. No Apache will harm her or the boy." Foster packed his medical supplies with a troubled expression. "It's not just the Apache you need to fear, Sarah. That newspaper is inflaming everyone. There's talk of organizing militias to hunt down any Apache off the reservation." He lowered his voice. "And Mayor Ellsworth has been meeting privately with Harrington. Something big is brewing." "How long can you keep my secret?" Sarah asked. Foster straightened his shoulders. "As long as necessary. I'm a doctor first, citizen. Second?" He picked up his bag. "I'll return in 2 days. Until then, keep him quiet and watch for fever." By the second full day of Blood of the Mountain's recovery, an uneasy routine had developed at the Holloway homestead. The Apache warriors took turns standing guard, their presence now hidden from casual observation, but ever vigilant. Thomas, his initial fear gradually giving way to curiosity, had begun to follow young Eagle around, watching the young warrior's techniques for setting snares and moving silently through the brush. Sarah tended to her patient with the same care she would give any injured person, changing bandages, preparing herbal remedies, and ensuring he took broth and water to regain his strength. The fact that this particular patient was the most feared Apache leader in the territory had become almost secondary in her mind. That afternoon, she brought him a cup of willow bark tea, helping him sit up to drink it. His strength was returning. Rapidly, his natural vitality accelerated by her careful nursing. "You make this different," he observed, sniffing the steaming liquid. "Sweeter. Honey," Sarah explained, "makes the bitterness easier to bear." Blood of the Mountain took the earthen cup from her hands, their fingers briefly touching. "My people would not think of this. Medicine should be bitter to fight strong illness." "Perhaps there's wisdom in both approaches," Sarah suggested. The chief studied her face as he drank. In the 2 days since regaining consciousness, he had watched this white woman closely. She moved with purpose and confidence, her hands strong but gentle, her eyes direct when she spoke. Nothing like the fragile, fearful settler women he had encountered before. "Your husband," he said finally. "Stoneface says he is dead." Sarah nodded, taking the empty cup. 3 years ago, influenza took him, along with a dozen others from town. You did not return to your people. A woman alone is vulnerable." Sarah finished with a slight smile. "Perhaps. But this is my home now. Thomas and I manage." Blood of the Mountain gestured to the cabin around them. "You built this?" "John built the cabin, but I've maintained it. Replaced the roof last summer, reinforced that wall there after the spring floods." Pride colored her voice. "We've added the chicken coop, the vegetable garden, the herb shed. You know plants, medicine. My grandmother taught me back in Tennessee. She learned from her mother and so on, back through the women in our family. When we came west, I learned new plants from Mexican curanderas and Pima women." The chief's eyebrows rose slightly at this. "You learned from the people?" "Different people, but yes. Healing knowledge doesn't belong to just one tribe or nation." Sarah reached for the bandage on his chest. "This needs changing." As she worked, Blood of the Mountain continued to study her. "Yesterday I heard you singing, not like white women's songs." Sarah's hands paused momentarily. "Water songs. I learned them from Louisa, a Mexican midwife. She said they helped the healing flow like clear water through the body. My mother sang such songs, he said quietly. The simple statement hung in the air between them, a brief glimpse into the man behind the fearsome reputation. Sarah finished bandaging his wound in silence, aware that something significant had just transpired, though she couldn't have named exactly what. From the doorway, Stoneface watched this exchange with troubled eyes. When Sarah left to dispose of the soiled bandages, he approached his chief. "You speak too freely with this woman," he said in Apache. Blood of the Mountain shook his head. "She saved my life twice now, once from the bear, once from the fever. I owe her truth at least. And when you are strong enough to leave, what then?" The chief didn't answer immediately. Instead, he nodded toward the window where Thomas could be seen outside, attentively watching young Eagle demonstrate how to fletch an arrow. "The boy learns quickly," Blood of the Mountain observed. "He has his mother's eyes, sees everything, misses nothing." "The cavalry searches for you," Stoneface pressed. "Each day we remain brings danger closer." "One more day," the chief decided. "Then we return to our people." That evening, as Sarah prepared a simple supper of rabbit stew and cornbread, Blood of the Mountain called her to his side. Reaching beneath his pallet, he withdrew a small clay cup, one she had used to give him medicine the previous day. "Sit," he commanded gently. When she complied, he filled the cup with water from his own flask, drank half, then offered it to her. Stoneface made a sound of protest from across the room. "Chief, this is not—" Blood of the Mountain silenced him with a look, then turned back to Sarah. "Drink," he said. Sarah understood enough about Apache customs to recognize the significance. Sharing a drinking vessel was an act of trust, of acceptance. She took the cup and drank. A rare smile transformed the chief's stern features. "Now we have shared water. Among my people, this means we are no longer strangers." Captain Harrington unrolled the map across the table in Mayor Ellsworth's study. Unlike the official military maps, this one contained detailed markings of Apache camps, water sources, and hidden trails. Information that had taken Ellsworth years to compile from various scouts, prospectors, and the occasional cooperative Indian. "Your sources were correct," Harrington said, tapping a location marked with a red X. "Our scouts confirm a large Apache encampment was here last week, but they've moved, unusually active for this time of year." Ellsworth stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Could be they're gathering for a raid. Or," Harrington countered, "they're looking for someone important who's gone missing." Blood of the Mountain. Ellsworth's eyes gleamed with interest. "You think he's the one your men heard at the Holloway place?" "It's a possibility I can't ignore." Harrington traced a line from the marked Apache camp to Sarah's homestead. "Somehow that woman is involved. Dr. Foster visited her yesterday, stayed longer than usual. Foster's sweet on the widow has been since her husband passed," Ellsworth said dismissively. "Nothing unusual there, perhaps. But I've stationed men to watch the homestead discreetly. If there's an Apache presence there, we'll know soon enough." The mayor leaned back in his leather chair. "And if you find him there, Blood of the Mountain himself," Harrington's eyes hardened, "then I'll have the perfect opportunity to eliminate the Apache threat once and for all, and make an example of anyone who harbors enemies of the United States." At the Holloway homestead, young Eagle had returned from scouting with troubling news. Stoneface translated for Sarah as they gathered around Blood of the Mountain's pallet. "Bluecoats watch your home," Stoneface explained. "2 soldiers hidden in trees on West Ridge. They have long seeing glass." Sarah's heart sank. "Harrington's men. They suspect something." Blood of the Mountain, now able to sit up without assistance, studied the crude map Stoneface had drawn in the dirt on the floor. "How many soldiers at fort?" 40. "Maybe 50, Sarah answered. "Plus the town could raise a militia of another 30 men. The chief nodded gravely. "Soon they will come, not just to watch." "We need to get you back to your people," Sarah said. "Tonight, under cover of darkness." "I can ride," Blood of the Mountain assured her, though Sarah doubted he was as strong as he claimed. Even if you could, they're watching the trails, she pointed out. We need a diversion. Young Eagle spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing enthusiastically. Stoneface translated, he says he can lead soldiers away, pretend to be hunting party, make them follow south while we go north. Sarah considered this. It might work, but it's risky. She turned to Blood of the Mountain. Where is your tribe? Now, how far? The Apache exchanged looks, their natural reluctance to share such information with a white person evident. Finally, the chief pointed to a location on Stoneface's dirt map, about a day's ride to the northeast. Hidden canyon, he explained. Good water, caves for the old ones and children. Sarah studied the crude map, mentally overlaying it with her knowledge of the territory. There's a back way, through Cottonwood Draw. Rarely used because it's difficult terrain, but I know it. We could avoid the main trails entirely. Blood of the Mountain's dark eyes held hers. Why do you help us still? Your debt is paid. You saved my life, tended my wounds. It was a fair question, one Sarah had asked herself repeatedly over the past 2 days. By all logic, she should be eager to see these dangerous men gone from her home, removing the threat to her and Thomas. Because what's happening to your people isn't right, she said finally, and because I've seen enough of war and hatred, enough death. The chief seemed to accept this answer. He reached for something wrapped in a small piece of buckskin beside his pallet. Unwrapping it, he revealed a detailed map drawn on a piece of tanned deerskin. Our sacred lands, he explained, spreading it out. Hunting grounds, places of the ancestors, water. His finger traced boundaries that existed nowhere on official government maps. Blue coats push here, here, and here. The finger jabbed at 3 locations where Cavalry had recently established outposts. They're surrounding you, Sarah realized. Seeing the strategy laid out before her, Blood of the Mountain nodded grimly. The reservation at San Carlos is, he searched for the English word, a prison. No game, bad water, disease. My people will die there. Sarah understood then why the chief fought so fiercely, why surrender wasn't an option. This wasn't just about land, it was about survival. We'll leave tonight, she decided. Thomas and I will guide you through Cottonwood Draw. The soldiers won't expect you to travel with a woman and child. Stoneface objected immediately, speaking rapidly in Apache. Blood of the Mountain responded sharply, silencing his lieutenant. He thinks it's too dangerous for you, the chief explained, that the blue coats will kill you for helping us. Sarah met his gaze steadily. They might, but I've made my choice. As dusk fell on the 3rd day, Sarah packed a small bundle of provisions, jerky, cornbread, dried apples, and her medical supplies. She moved methodically, her mind racing despite her calm exterior. The decision to guide Blood of the Mountain and his warriors through Cottonwood Draw had not been made lightly. She was risking everything, her home, her safety, even Thomas's future. Are you certain about this? Blood of the Mountain asked from where he sat on the edge of the pallet. Testing his strength by standing briefly before sitting again, Sarah glanced at him. No, but it feels right. The chief nodded, understanding the distinction. Like when you ran at the bear. Exactly like that. Sarah smiled faintly. Not wise, perhaps, but necessary. She reached into her pocket and withdrew her husband's pocket. Watch the silver case worn smooth from years of handling. John had carried it throughout their journey west, checking it each evening as they made camp, a small ritual connecting them to civilization as they ventured into the wilderness. Sarah held it for a moment, thumb tracing the engraved initials. Then, surprising herself, she extended it to Blood of the Mountain. I want you to have this, she said. The chief looked at the offering with confusion. A timepiece. I have no use for white man's hours. It's not about telling time, Sarah explained. It belonged to my husband. It's... She searched for words. He would understand. A symbol of trust. A promise that not all white settlers want war with your people. Blood of the Mountain hesitated, then accepted the watch, turning it over in his hands. This was precious to him? To you? Yes. The chief seemed to recognize the significance of the gesture. He tucked the watch carefully into a small pouch at his waist. I too have lost one who was precious. My wife, Singing Bird, 3 summers ago. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly. Was she ill? Cavalry. The word contained volumes of pain and rage. A raid on our camp. She was helping the old ones. Escape. His voice grew distant. I found her with the others, no weapons in their hands. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this new understanding of the man before her. The savage raids attributed to Blood of the Mountain now cast in a different light. Not random violence, but the response of a man who had lost everything that mattered. John died of fever, she said quietly. I couldn't save him, despite all my medicines and prayers. Thomas was 7. He still cries for his father sometimes when he thinks I can't hear. They sat in silence for a moment, the shared experience of loss bridging the vast gulf between their worlds. Thomas entered from outside, breaking the moment. Mama, young Eagle says it's time. The soldiers changed guards and the new ones are eating their supper. Sarah nodded, returning to the practical necessities. Are you ready? Once we leave, we can't come back. Not for a while, at least. Thomas looked around the cabin that had been his home for most of his young life. I packed Pa's compass and his hunting knife, like you said. His voice held a child's excitement about the adventure, not yet comprehending the gravity of their situation. As Sarah made final preparations, Blood of the Mountain approached Thomas. The boy had grown somewhat accustomed to the Apache's presence, but still tensed slightly as the imposing warrior neared. You help your mother, the chief observed. Good son. Thomas straightened, pride evident in his stance. I'm the man of the house now. Blood of the Mountain nodded solemnly. My son was also becoming a man. Thomas's eyes widened. You have a son. Had. The chief's expression remained stoic, but pain flickered in his dark eyes. Same sickness that took your father swept through our camp. My son, Mountain Lion, was 12 winters. Thomas absorbed this information with a child's directness. So you lost someone too? Yes. Blood of the Mountain placed a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. We are not so different, you and I. Stoneface appeared in the doorway. Time, he said simply. Sarah took a last look around the cabin, the table where they'd eaten countless meals, the hearth where she'd taught Thomas his letters, the rocking chair where John had once held their infant son. So many memories contained. Within these walls, we're ready, she declared, though her heart ached at what they were leaving behind. Outside, the warriors had prepared horses, Sarah's own mare and gelding, plus 3 Apache ponies. Young Eagle and 2 others had already departed to create the diversion, drawing the cavalry scouts southward. Blood of the Mountain mounted with assistance, his face betraying no pain, though Sarah knew his wounds must be agonizing. As she helped Thomas onto the gelding, the chief spoke quietly. If you do this, there is no going back. The blue coats will never forget. Sarah met his gaze in the gathering darkness. I know. Dr. Foster rode hard through the night, his horse lathered despite the cool air. The sealed military orders he carried inside his coat burned against his chest like a brand. He had never imagined himself as a spy or a traitor, yet here he was, racing to warn Sarah Holloway and a band of Apache warriors about an imminent cavalry attack. It had begun innocuously enough. Captain Harrington requesting his presence at the fort to treat a soldier with a festering wound. But while waiting in the captain's office, Foster had noticed the orders on the desk, the map with Sarah's homestead clearly marked, the notation, 0500 hours, secure Apache fugitives and collaborators. Dawn was less than 2 hours away, if he could reach Sarah in time. Meanwhile, Sarah led their small party through the treacherous confines of Cottonwood Draw. The narrow canyon with its sheer walls would be suicide in daylight, too easy for pursuers to trap them. But in darkness, with Sarah's intimate knowledge of every twist and turn, it offered their best chance of escape. Thomas rode close behind her, followed by Blood of the Mountain, with Stoneface and 2 warriors bringing up the rear. They travelled in silence, the only sounds the occasional clink of hardware on the horse's tack and the soft shuffle of hooves on sandy ground. "How much farther?" Blood of the Mountain asked as they paused to rest the horses. "We'll reach the north. End of the draw by first light," Sarah replied, keeping her voice low. "Then it's open country for a few miles before we reach the foothills where your people are camped." The chief nodded, his face taut with pain, though he made no complaint. Sarah could tell his wounds were troubling him, the strenuous ride reopening what had barely begun to heal. "We should check your bandages at the next stop," she said. Stoneface approached, his permanent grimace somehow more pronounced in the moonlight. "Riders," he whispered, "far behind, following." Sarah's heart sank. They shouldn't have found our trail so quickly. "Young Eagle's diversion?" Blood of the Mountain asked. Stoneface shook his head. "Maybe failed, or betrayal." "We need to move faster," Sarah decided. "There's a side canyon ahead that's not on any maps. It will slow us down, but they'll ride past if they don't know it." "Exists." As they mounted to continue, a distant sound froze them in place, the baying of hounds. "They brought dogs," Sarah whispered, fear evident in her voice. No matter how clever their path, no hidden canyon would fool the keen noses of cavalry. "Tracking hounds." Blood of the Mountain's expression hardened. "Go," he commanded the warriors. "Take the woman and boy to our people. I will lead the dogs away." "No," Sarah protested. "You're not strong enough." "I am Blood of the Mountain," he replied simply, as if that explained everything. "Perhaps it did." Stoneface spoke rapidly in Apache, clearly arguing against the plan. The chief cut him off with a sharp gesture. "My life for the lives of my warriors, and for those who helped me," Blood of the Mountain said firmly. "This is the way." Before Sarah could object further, the sound of an approaching rider caught their attention. Everyone tensed, weapons appearing. In the warrior's hands. "Sarah," a familiar voice called softly. "Sarah, it's Foster." Relief flooded through her as the doctor's figure emerged from the darkness. His horse was near exhaustion, foam flecking its chest and mouth. "William, what are you doing here?" Foster dismounted quickly. "Harrington is coming, at first light, with 20 men. They know about Blood of the Mountain. Someone in town informed on you." "How did you know where to find us?" Sarah asked. "You once mentioned Cottonwood Draw as a secret way north," Foster explained breathlessly. "I guessed you'd use it." He handed Sarah the sealed orders he'd stolen. "This proves what I'm saying. They plan to arrest you and Thomas as well, collaborating with enemies of the United States." Blood of the Mountain had been listening intently. "How far behind are they?" 2 hours, maybe less. "They were preparing when I slipped away." The chief exchanged looks with Stoneface, some unspoken communication passing between them. "This changes our plan," he said finally. "We cannot outrun them now, not with the woman and child." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "We make stand. Here." Blood of the Mountain pointed to the narrow walls of the canyon around them. "Good place for few warriors against many soldiers." "That's suicide," Foster objected. "Not to fight, to talk." The chief turned to Sarah. "You said not all white men want war. This doctor proves it. Maybe others will. Listen." Sarah understood what he was proposing. A desperate gamble that rational dialogue could succeed where flight had failed. It seemed impossible, yet a flicker of hope kindled within her. "Dawn," Blood of the Mountain said, looking eastward where the faintest lightning was visible in the sky. "We prepare to meet the blue coats with open hands, not weapons." He fixed Sarah with an intense gaze. "But first, we must reach my people. They are close now." Foster looked confused. "I don't understand. If they're pursuing us, how can we reach?" "Your tribe first." Blood of the Mountain's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Because they are already here." As the first pale light of dawn spread across the eastern sky, Sarah stood in silent awe at the sight before her. They had emerged from Cottonwood Draw into a small hidden valley, and there, camped in perfect stillness, was Blood of the Mountain's entire tribe. Hundreds of Apache, men, women, children, and elders, had gathered, their presence betrayed only by the faintest wisps of cook fires, carefully banked to produce minimal smoke. "You knew they would be here," Sarah said, turning to the chief. Blood of the Mountain nodded. "Young Eagle reached them yesterday. I hope to return to my people before the Bluecoats found us." His gaze swept over the encampment with unmistakable pride. "Now we must make a different path." As they rode into the camp, the Apache people emerged from their wickiups and brush shelters. A murmur rippled through the gathering at the sight of their chief returning with white companions. Stoneface called out in their language, explaining the situation in rapid, urgent tones. An elderly man stepped forward, his face deeply lined with age, his long white hair adorned with eagle feathers. Blood of the Mountain dismounted carefully, still favoring his injured leg, and approached the old man with reverence. "Many winters," he said. "My father's brother. He speaks with the wisdom of the ancestors." The tribal elder studied Sarah, Thomas, and Foster with penetrating black eyes that missed nothing despite his advanced age. He spoke a few words, gesturing toward Sarah. "He asks if you are the woman who fought the bear." Stoneface translated. Sarah nodded respectfully. "I only frightened it away." When this was translated, a ripple of murmurs passed through the gathered tribe. Many winters approached Sarah, moving with surprising agility for one so aged. He reached out a gnarled hand and touched her hair, a gesture that seemed both curious and reverent. "He says hair, the color of sunset, is powerful medicine," Stoneface explained. "Sign of strong spirit." The elder spoke at length, his voice rising and falling in the cadence of formal oratory. The assembled Apache listened with rapt attention. "What is he saying?" Sarah whispered to Blood of the Mountain. "That the old stories speak of this time, when enemies would become allies and the future of the people would hang by a thread thinner than spider silk." The chief's expression was solemn. "He says you were sent by the mountain spirit to save me, so that I might lead our people on a new path." Foster shifted uncomfortably. "This is all very fascinating, but Harrington and his men will be here within the hour. We need to prepare." Blood of the Mountain nodded and spoke rapidly to the elder and other tribal leaders who had gathered. Soon the camp burst into organized activity, warriors taking defensive positions while women and children moved deeper into the valley. Many winters beckoned Sarah to follow him to a small fire at the center of the camp. There, seated on a buffalo robe, was an ancient woman whose face was so deeply wrinkled it resembled the bark of a centuries-old pine. This was Seas Beyond Mountains, the tribe's medicine woman. The old woman studied Sarah intently, then reached into a small buckskin pouch at her waist. She withdrew a single white feather, which she extended toward Sarah with both hands. "A great honor," Blood of the Mountain explained quietly. "The white feather represents peace, truth, and new beginnings. She offers you adoption into the tribe." Sarah hesitated, understanding the profound significance of this moment. "What should I do?" "Accept with both hands, then she will mark your forehead with sacred pollen." Sarah carefully took the feather as instructed. Seas Beyond Mountains smiled, revealing few remaining teeth, and reached again into her pouch for a pinch of yellow cattail pollen. With a surprisingly steady hand, she drew a line across Sarah's forehead, chanting softly. Thomas watched wide-eyed as the medicine woman repeated the ritual with him. "What does this mean, Mama?" he whispered. "It means we're under their protection now," Sarah explained. "We're part of their family." Blood of the Mountain, who had been conferring with his warriors, returned to them. "Scouts report cavalry approaching from the south, less than a mile away." Foster's face paled. 20 armed men against women and children. It will be a massacre. "Not if we prevent it," Blood of the Mountain replied. "Many winters has agreed to your talk of peace, but warriors will be ready if words fail." He turned to Sarah. "You must speak for us. Bluecoats will not listen to Apache words." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. How could she, a simple frontier healer, stand between the U.S. Cavalry and a tribe they'd been ordered to subdue? Yet looking at the faces around her, the elders who had accepted her, the children watching with solemn eyes, and Blood of the Mountain who had entrusted her with his people's future, she knew she had to try. "I'll need something to show I come." "In peace," she said, "something they'll recognize." Blood of the Mountain nodded to Stoneface, who disappeared briefly into a nearby wickiup. He returned with a weathered ceremonial pipe, its long stem adorned with feathers and beadwork. "The peace pipe," the chief explained. "Not used in 3 generations. My grandfather's grandfather smoked with Spanish soldiers, made the last true peace." His dark eyes held Sarah's. "Perhaps today it will serve again." Captain Harrington raised his hand, signaling the cavalry column to halt. Through his spyglass, he studied the narrow valley entrance ahead. His scouts had reported following the fugitives' trail to this location, but something felt wrong. The valley appeared too quiet, too still. "Sir," Lieutenant Collins said quietly, "the dogs have lost the scent. They seem confused." Harrington lowered his spyglass with a frown. "The Apache know tricks to fool tracking hounds. Pepper, certain herbs." He scanned the rocky ridges surrounding them. "They're here. I can feel it." "Orders, sir." Before Harrington could respond, a lone figure appeared at the valley entrance, a woman in a faded blue dress, carrying what appeared to be a decorated wooden staff. "Sarah Holloway." "Hold positions," Harrington commanded, his voice hard. "This may be a trap." Sarah approached slowly, her heart pounding but her steps steady. The peace pipe felt heavy in her hands, its significance weighing on her more than its physical presence. Behind her, hidden among the rocks, Blood of the Mountain and his warriors watched, ready to intervene if the cavalry showed hostility. "Mrs. Holloway!" Harrington called when she was within speaking distance. "You are harboring fugitives from United States justice. Surrender immediately, and you may yet avoid the charge of treason." Sarah stopped several yards from the mounted soldiers. "Captain Harrington, I've come to prevent bloodshed. There are women and children in this valley." "Apache women and children," Harrington clarified coldly, "and warriors who have murdered American citizens. Your duty as a settler is clear." "Duty as a human being is also clear," Sarah replied. "These people seek peace." Harrington's laugh was short and harsh. "Peace? Blood of the Mountain doesn't want peace. He wants to continue raiding settlements and killing soldiers." "You're wrong," Sarah said firmly. "He wants his people to survive. The reservation at San Carlos is a death sentence. Inadequate water, poor soil, disease. Would you not fight if someone tried to force your family into such conditions?" "This is not a negotiation, Mrs. Holloway. Step aside or be arrested with the rest." Sarah held up the peace pipe. "This pipe belonged to Blood of the Mountain's ancestors. It was last used to forge peace with the Spanish generations ago. He offers it now as a symbol of his willingness to find a better path." Some of the soldiers exchanged glances, clearly affected by the gravity of the gesture. Lieutenant Collins leaned toward his commander. "Sir, if they're genuinely offering peace talks—" "Silence, Lieutenant," Harrington snapped. He fixed Sarah with a hard stare. "Where is he? Where is Blood of the Mountain?" "I am here." The deep voice came from behind Sarah as the Apache chief emerged from the rocks, moving with dignity despite his injuries. He wore no weapons and raised his hands to show they were empty. A murmur ran through the cavalry ranks. Many had fought against this legendary warrior, but none had seen him face to face. His presence was commanding, his scarred features testament to a lifetime of battles. "Captain," Blood of the Mountain said in his accented English, "this woman saved my life. Then she showed me that not all white people seek our destruction. I would speak with you, man to man, about the future of my people." Harrington's hand moved to his pistol. You're a wanted man. The only future you have is at the end of a rope. If you kill him, you'll have to kill us all, Sarah interjected. And the story will spread throughout the territory. How the brave. Captain Harrington massacred women and children who were offering peace. Dr. Foster chose that moment to emerge and join them. Captain, I can attest that this offer is genuine. I've seen how these people live, how they care for their children and elders. They want what we all want, safety and a future for their families. Harrington's expression darkened. Foster, I might have known you'd be part of this treachery. It's not treachery to seek a just solution, Foster replied. You have orders to remove the Apache threat. What if that could be accomplished without bloodshed? Wouldn't that be a greater victory? For a long moment, Harrington sat rigid in his saddle, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. His orders were clear, but the situation before him was not what he had expected. Finally, he addressed Blood of the Mountain directly. What exactly are you proposing? Before the chief could answer, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. A group of riders appeared on the trail behind the cavalry, Mayor Ellsworth, accompanied by several townsmen. "Captain," Ellsworth called, his face flushed with exertion. "Don't listen to them. The Apache must be removed if our development plans are to proceed." "Development plans?" Lieutenant Collins echoed, confused. Sarah seized the moment. "Tell them, Mayor. Tell them about the copper deposits discovered on Apache land. Tell them about the mining companies you've been courting, promising them access once the Indians are gone." Ellsworth's face reddened further. "That's a damnable lie." Sarah withdrew a folded paper from her pocket, the letter Foster had taken from Harrington's desk. "This order authorizes removal of the Apache specifically to facilitate territorial development, not because of raids or violence, but for copper mining." Blood of the Mountain's eyes narrowed as he understood the implications. So, not for peace or safety of settlers, for metal in the ground. Several soldiers looked to their captain with uncertainty. Harrington, caught between his orders and this unexpected revelation, hesitated. "Captain," Sarah pressed, "there's a better way. Let Blood of the Mountain speak. At least hear what he has to say." The tension in the valley entrance was palpable as Captain Harrington considered his options. His orders were clear, but the situation had become complicated by Ellsworth's unexpected arrival and Sarah's damning revelation. "This changes nothing," Ellsworth blustered, dismounting and striding forward. "The territory needs development. These savages have held back progress long enough." "Is copper more valuable than human lives, Mayor?" Sarah challenged. "Don't be naive, woman," Ellsworth snapped. "This is the march of civilization. The Apache are relics of a dying past." Blood of the Mountain watched this exchange with keen intelligence, understanding more than they realized. "We are not dying," he said firmly. "We adapt. We survive. For 1,000 years before your kind came." Harrington remained silent, his military discipline at war with his sense of honor. Lieutenant Collins leaned toward him again. "Sir, if the mayor's private interests are driving military action..." The captain made his decision. "Dismount," he ordered his men, "but stay alert." As the cavalry soldiers dismounted, keeping their weapons ready, Blood of the Mountain signaled to the rocks around them. Dozens of Apache warriors revealed themselves, bows drawn and rifles aimed. They had surrounded the cavalry patrol completely. "I could have killed you all already," the chief said simply. "Instead, I offer to talk." Harrington's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. "Talk, then." Sarah breathed a small sigh of relief and glanced at Foster, who looked equally surprised. That bloodshed had been temporarily averted. She handed the peace pipe to Blood of the Mountain, who accepted it with solemn dignity. "My people cannot go to San Carlos," the chief began. "It is death by slow starvation, by sickness, by despair. This is known. Even your own Indian agents report this truth to Washington. What alternative do you propose?" Harrington asked stiffly. "The mountains to the north," Blood of the Mountain indicated with a gesture. "No copper there, no gold, Just forest, water, game. Let my people live there in peace. We will stay within boundaries you draw on your maps. No more raids on settlements or wagon trains." "Impossible," Ellsworth interrupted. "The whole territory is marked for development. There's no place for—" "Quiet, Mayor," Harrington commanded, his patience with the civilian clearly wearing thin. "Let him finish." Blood of the Mountain continued. "In return for this land, we will allow safe passage for settlers through our territory, and—" He looked at Sarah, something unspoken passing between them. "We will share knowledge. Plants that heal, ways to find water in dry times, how to survive in this harsh land." "Knowledge?" Ellsworth scoffed. "What could we possibly learn from—" "The Apache have survived in this territory for centuries," Foster interjected. "Their medicinal knowledge alone is invaluable. I've seen Sarah combine her European remedies with Apache healing plants to save lives when conventional medicine failed." Sarah stepped forward, reaching into her pocket to withdraw a folded paper. "I've written a testimony about what I've witnessed, both the Apache's willingness to coexist peacefully and the mayor's scheme to profit from their removal. I'm prepared to send copies to territorial officials and newspapers in San Francisco." Ellsworth's face purpled. "No one would believe a woman who consorts archers with savages." "They would believe me," Foster added, "as a respected physician and witness to these events." While this argument continued, Sarah noticed Thomas had slipped away from her side. Looking around anxiously, she spotted him approaching the line of soldiers. Before she could call him back, he had stopped in front of a young cavalry private. "My pa had a uniform like yours," Thomas said, his voice carrying in a momentary lull. "Before he was a settler, he fought in the war." The young soldier seemed taken aback by the boy's direct approach. "Did he now?" Thomas nodded earnestly. "He said soldiers protect people who can't protect themselves. That's what being a soldier means." The simple statement hung in the air, its childlike clarity cutting through the complex adult wrangling. Several soldiers shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the Apache women and children now visible at the valley entrance, watching the proceedings with apprehensive faces. Blood of the Mountain seized the moment. "Captain, you are a warrior as I am. We fight for our people. But there is no honor in fighting women and children, in taking land not for safety but for—" He searched for the English word, "profit." Harrington's stern expression faltered slightly. He looked from the chief to Sarah, to the assembled Apache families, and finally to his own men, many of whom seemed relieved at the prospect of avoiding bloodshed. "Stand down, men," he ordered finally. "Weapons at ease." "Captain!" Ellsworth protested. "You can't possibly—" "Mayor," Harrington cut him off coldly, "I'm beginning to suspect that you've manipulated military operations for personal gain. That's a serious offense." Lieutenant Collins stepped forward. "Sir, territorial regulations permit provisional agreements pending review by higher authorities. We could draft terms for a temporary arrangement." Harrington considered this, then nodded curtly. "Mrs. Holloway, Dr. Foster, you will act as witnesses and intermediaries. Chief," he hesitated, then deliberately used the name with respect. "Blood of the Mountain. Select your representatives. We will discuss terms." As the tension slowly dissipated, Sarah found herself standing between two worlds, the cavalry on one side, the Apache on the other. Blood of the Mountain moved to her side, his presence both reassuring and unsettling in its intensity. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "Many will resist peace." "But it is a beginning," Sarah replied. "And that's more than we had yesterday." The impromptu peace council convened beneath the shade of cottonwood trees near the valley entrance. Captain Harrington and Lieutenant Collins represented the U.S. Army, while Blood of the Mountain, Stoneface, and Many Winters spoke for the Apache. Sarah and Dr. Foster sat between the groups as mediators, with Thomas quietly observing from nearby. Mayor Ellsworth had been firmly escorted to the side by two cavalry privates, his protests falling on increasingly deaf ears as the seriousness of his manipulation became apparent. "These are the northern boundaries we propose," Blood of the Mountain said, using a stick to draw in the dirt. "From the Twin Peaks to the River Bend. Good hunting, water all year." Harrington studied the crude map with a professional eye. "That's a considerable territory. Less than 1/10 of what was once ours," Stoneface noted bitterly. Many Winters spoke at length in Apache, his aged voice carrying surprising strength. When he finished, Blood of the Mountain translated. "He says the land remembers who walked upon it first, but the land does not die when newcomers arrive. It only changes, like the seasons. The Apache must also change, but not disappear." Sarah was struck by the old man's wisdom. "The boundaries seem reasonable, Captain. It's mostly rugged country, not suitable for farming or easy mining." "And in exchange," Harrington pressed, addressing the chief, "your raids stop completely. All of them? My people will not attack settlers or soldiers who respect these boundaries," Blood of the Mountain confirmed. "We will allow safe passage on the main trails through our territory, but," his eyes hardened, "we will defend ourselves if attacked." Lieutenant Collins had been taking notes on a small pad. "What about the matter of jurisdiction, if crimes occur on either side?" This sparked intense discussion. Eventually, a compromise emerged. A council of both Apache and settler representatives would address any violations of the peace, with the army serving as enforcers of their joint decisions. As these details were being hammered out, Sarah noticed a commotion at the valley entrance. Young Eagle was returning with his small band of warriors, those who had created the diversion the previous night. But they weren't alone. They escorted a military officer Sarah didn't recognize, his uniform indicating higher rank than Harrington's. "Colonel Davis," Harrington said, rising quickly to attention as the newcomer approached. The colonel, a weathered man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and penetrating eyes, surveyed the scene with evident surprise. "Captain, this is not exactly the operation I expected to find when I decided to observe your Apache campaign. Sir, I can explain at ease, Captain." Colonel Davis turned his attention to the Apache delegation, his gaze lingering on Blood of the Mountain. "So, the infamous war chief in person." The Apache leader met his gaze steadily. "And you are the new blue-coat chief. Your warriors speak your name with respect." This seemed to surprise Davis. He turned to Sarah and Foster. "And civilians involved in negotiations? Most irregular." Sarah stood, meeting the colonel's gaze directly. "Mrs. Sarah Holloway, sir. This is Dr. Foster from Copper Springs. We're serving as intermediaries." "Intermediaries," Davis repeated, testing the word. "Between the U.S. Army and a band of hostile Apache." "With respect, Colonel," Foster interjected, "they're not currently hostile. They're offering terms for a lasting peace." Davis raised an eyebrow. "Peace? With Blood of the Mountain?" He sounded skeptical, but not dismissive. Sarah seized the opening. "Colonel, I saved the chief's life when he was attacked by a grizzly bear. In return, he and his people have pledged protection to me and my son. That same principle of reciprocity can extend to a wider peace." "A grizzly bear," Davis echoed, his expression suggesting he found the story far-fetched. "It's true," Harrington confirmed reluctantly. "Our scouts found evidence of the encounter, bear tracks, blood, signs of a struggle, and Mrs. Holloway treated his wounds consistent with a bear attack." The colonel circled the gathering, slowly, examining the crude map drawn in the dirt, noting the proposed boundaries. And the reason for this sudden desire for negotiation. Sarah held out the letter she'd shown earlier. Evidence that certain civilian authorities have been manipulating military operations for personal financial gain. Specifically, to clear valuable copper deposits on Apache land. Davis read the document, his expression darkening. He glanced toward Mayor Ellsworth, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Lieutenant," Davis addressed Collins, "place the mayor under arrest pending investigation." As Ellsworth was led away, loudly proclaiming his innocence, Davis turned back to the Peace Council. "I'm authorized to make provisional arrangements pending approval from the Department of War. If this proposal has Captain Harrington's endorsement, it does, sir," Harrington said, making his decision. "It's imperfect, but it's better than more bloodshed on both sides." Blood of the Mountain stood, his bearing regal despite his injuries, and extended the ceremonial peace pipe toward Colonel Davis. "Smoke together, as our ancestors did. Seal words with breath and fire." A hush fell over the gathering. Even the Apache warriors watching from the rocks seemed to hold their breath. This was the moment of truth. Would the U.S. Army, represented by this colonel, take the symbolic step? Davis hesitated only briefly before accepting the pipe. "I've smoked with Cheyenne and Sioux," he said. "Never thought I'd find myself doing the same with Blood of the Mountain." As the sacred pipe was lit and passed between the principal figures, Sarah felt a profound sense of witnessing history. The smoke rose skyward, carrying with it the promise of a different path forward, one neither side had imagined possible. Just days before, beside her, Thomas whispered, "Did we do it, Mama? Did we make peace?" Sarah put her arm around her son's shoulders. "We've started something, Thomas. Whether it becomes true peace depends on what happens next." 1 year later, Sarah stood on the porch of her homestead, watching the unusual procession approaching along the valley road. Apache riders mingled with settlers in wagons, while uniformed cavalry scouts flanked the group, not as adversaries but as escorts. The trading day that occurred once each month had become a fixture of the new peace, bringing together those who had once been mortal enemies. "Thomas," she called, "they're coming!" Her son, now 11 and taller than the year before, emerged from the barn where he'd been helping with the morning chores. In the past year, he had changed in ways beyond mere physical growth. He moved with newfound confidence, spoke phrases in the Apache language, and carried himself with the dignified bearing he had learned from his unlikely mentors. "I see, young eagle," Thomas exclaimed, spotting his friend among the Apache riders. Sarah smiled. The friendship between her son and the young warrior was one of many unexpected blessings born from that fateful encounter with the grizzly bear. Her homestead, once isolated, had transformed into a meeting ground between two worlds, a trading post where Apache brought game, crafts, and medicinal herbs to exchange for tools, cloth, and other settler goods. Dr. Foster was among the first to reach the homestead, his buggy loaded with medical supplies. The arrangement they had established, combining Western medicine with Apache healing traditions, had proven remarkably effective. Sarah's reputation as a healer had spread throughout the territory, drawing both settlers and native people seeking her unique approach. "Good morning, Sarah," Foster greeted her warmly as he climbed down from his buggy. "Quite a turnout today." "Word's spreading," she replied. "Even some Pima traders this time, I see." The doctor glanced toward the approaching Apache riders, spotting the imposing figure at their lead. "Our friend seems well recovered from his ordeal." Sarah's eyes followed Foster's gaze to Blood of the Mountain, riding tall and proud at the head of his people. The fearsome war chief had transformed too, not softened exactly, but redirected his formidable leadership toward building peace rather than waging war. As the chief dismounted before her porch, Sarah felt the familiar quickening of her pulse. Their connection, forged in blood and danger, had deepened over the months of working together to maintain the fragile peace. "Sarah Holloway," he greeted her formally, using her full name as was his custom in public. "The hunting was good. We bring deer and elk to trade." "Welcome," she replied with equal formality. "The garden has been generous. We have vegetables and herbs to share." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, communicating what propriety and their respective positions wouldn't yet allow them to voice openly. Then the spell broke as Thomas rushed forward to greet young Eagle, and the trading day's activities began in earnest. Later, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Sarah found a quiet moment with blood of the mountain away from the bustle of trading. Colonel Davis returns next week, she informed him. The territorial governor is considering making our arrangement permanent. The chief nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Many did not believe it would last this long, on both sides. And yet here we are, Sarah said softly. From his pocket, Blood of the Mountain withdrew John Holloway's watch, the one Sarah had given him on the night of their escape. He had carried it faithfully, a tangible symbol of the trust between them. Time moves differently for my people, he said, his voice low and intimate. We mark seasons, not hours, but I have learned that sometimes a single moment can change everything. His dark eyes held hers, like a woman charging a bear with only a red shawl. Sarah smiled at the memory that had altered both their lives so profoundly. We've built something important here. Yes, but there is more to build. He hesitated, then added, for our peoples, and perhaps for us. The implication hung in the air between them, not a declaration, but a question, a possibility. Before Sarah could respond, Thomas appeared with a folded paper in hand. Mama, look what young Eagle helped me draw. The boy proudly displayed his artwork, a carefully rendered sketch showing figures around a campfire. Sarah recognized herself and Thomas, Blood of the Mountain and Stoneface, Dr. Foster and Colonel Davis, even young Eagle and some of the Apache children. Settler and Apache, soldier and civilian, all gathered in a circle of harmony that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. It's beautiful, Thomas, she said, genuinely moved by the child's vision. Blood of the Mountain studied the drawing with equal appreciation. The boy sees clearly, he observed, two paths becoming one. As the trading day concluded and people began their journeys home, the settlers to their town, the Apache to their mountain stronghold, and the cavalry to their fort, Sarah stood once more on her porch. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, transforming the rugged terrain into something magical and full of promise. Somewhere in these hills, the grizzly that had brought them together still roamed. Sarah wondered if the great bear somehow knew what its fearsome appearance had set in motion, how a moment of terrible danger had given birth to understanding, then respect, then something deeper that continued to grow with each passing season. From a hook by the door hung her red shawl, its fabric still bearing the faint stains of both bear and Apache blood, a humble piece of cloth that had changed the course of history in this small corner of the Arizona Territory.